If you ask most people why Rome fell, they will probably give you one answer: barbarians. And that answer is not completely wrong. In the 5th century, groups like the Visigoths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths did play a major role in the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Rome was attacked. Rome lost territory. And in 476 AD, the last Western Roman emperor was removed from power. But that simple answer hides a much more important question. Why was Rome, an empire that had survived for centuries, no longer strong enough to stop them? Because the truth is, Rome was not destroyed overnight. It did not fall because of one battle, one invasion, or one bad emperor. By the time foreign powers delivered the final blows, the Western Roman Empire had already been weakening for generations. Its economy was under pressure. Its politics were unstable. Its army had changed. Its borders were harder to defend. And more people inside the empire were losing faith in the system that was supposed to protect them. So, to understand the fall of Rome, we have to stop looking for one single cause. We have to look at a chain reaction. And that chain reaction began with the very thing that once made Rome powerful: expansion. For centuries, Rome grew by conquest. Every victory brought new land, new taxes, new slaves, new resources, and new wealth. Expansion paid for the army, supported public projects, rewarded generals, and made the Roman world richer. As long as Rome kept growing, the system worked, but no empire can expand forever. Eventually, the borders became too long, the enemies became harder to defeat, and the cost of defending new territory became greater than the rewards of conquering it. Rome had built a system that depended on growth, but now growth was slowing down. The empire still needed huge amounts of money. Soldiers had to be paid, roads had to be repaired, forts had to be maintained, officials had to be supported, cities still expected grain, order, and protection. But the easy wealth from conquest was no longer flowing like before. This created a serious financial problem. Roman leaders needed more revenue, so taxes increased. But higher taxes placed more pressure on ordinary people, especially small farmers and local communities. At the same time, the government often weakened the currency. Coins that once contained more silver were gradually produced with less silver inside them. On the surface, the empire could still create money, but that money was worth less. Prices rose, savings became less secure, confidence weakened, and when confidence disappears, an economy becomes much harder to control. This was not just a money problem, it became a social problem. Wealthy landowners expanded their estates, while many small farmers struggled with debt, taxes, and insecurity. Some lost their land. Others became dependent on powerful local elites for protection. In theory, they still lived inside the Roman Empire, but in practice their loyalty was becoming more local and personal. Instead of trusting the state, they depended on whoever nearby could offer safety. That matters because an empire is not held together only by armies and laws. It is held together by belief. People have to believe the system works. They have to believe the government can protect them, tax them fairly, and maintain order. When that belief weakens, the empire may still look powerful from the outside, but inside, its foundations are already changing. And while Rome was facing economic and social pressure, its politics became dangerously unstable. The clearest example is the crisis of the 3rd century, from 235 to 284 AD. During this period, more than 20 men claimed the imperial throne. Many were assassinated. Some ruled for only months. A few barely had time to govern at all. The throne became less like a stable institution and more like a prize that generals could fight over. This damaged Rome deeply. Every civil war consumed money, soldiers, and attention. Every rebellion weakened the borders. Every assassination made the position of emperor feel less legitimate. Instead of solving long-term problems, rulers often had to focus on surviving the next conspiracy, the next rival, or the next military uprising. Rome survived this crisis, but survival came at a cost. The empire had learned that power could be taken by force. Armies could make emperors, generals could become rulers, and once political violence becomes normal, stability becomes very hard to rebuild. The army also changed. In Rome's strongest centuries, the army was one of its greatest advantages. Roman soldiers were disciplined, organized, and tied to the identity of the empire. But over time, soldiers became increasingly loyal to the commanders who paid them, rewarded them, and promised them land. This was dangerous. A successful general with loyal troops could become more threatening to the emperor than a foreign enemy. The army was supposed to defend Rome from outsiders, but too often Roman armies fought other Roman armies. Every internal conflict drained strength from the frontiers, and this is one of the key points in Rome's decline. The empire did not only lose strength because enemies attacked it. It lost strength because it kept using its own power against itself. At the same time, pressure was growing beyond the borders. Germanic groups such as the Goths, Vandals, Franks and others moved closer to Roman territory. These groups were not all the same, and they were not simply mindless destroyers. Some wanted land, some wanted safety, some were fleeing pressure from other groups, including the Huns. Some wanted to serve inside the Roman system. Rome had always dealt with outsiders through trade, treaties, settlement, and military recruitment. The problem was not contact with foreign peoples. Rome had absorbed outsiders for centuries. The problem was that by the 4th and 5th centuries, Rome was absorbing them from a weaker position. A strong empire can integrate outsiders on its own terms. A weakened empire has less control over the process. One major turning point came in 376 AD, when large numbers of Goths crossed the Danube into Roman territory, seeking refuge from the Huns. The Romans allowed them in, but the situation was badly handled. Corruption, mistreatment and shortages created anger and desperation. Soon the Goths rebelled. In 378 AD, at the Battle of Adrianople, the Roman army suffered a devastating defeat, and Emperor Valens was killed. Adrianople did not destroy the empire by itself, but it showed that Rome was no longer invincible. After that, the empire increasingly had to negotiate with groups it once might have dominated. Some were settled inside Roman territory, some served as allied troops, some became involved in Roman politics. This was not automatically a disaster, but the balance had changed. The Western Empire needed these groups more and more, while having less ability to fully control them. Then came the event that shocked the Roman world, the sack of Rome in 410 AD. The Visigoths, led by Alaric, entered the city. Rome was no longer the main political capital of the Western Empire at that time, but symbolically it still mattered enormously. For centuries, Rome had represented power, order, and permanence. The idea that foreign soldiers could enter and sack the city was almost unthinkable, but even this was not the end. The Western Roman Empire continued after 410. The sack of Rome was not the moment the empire collapsed. It was the moment everyone could see that the old image of Roman invincibility had been broken. In the decades that followed, the Western Empire kept losing control. The Vandals crossed into North Africa and eventually took Carthage in 439 AD. This was a huge blow, because North Africa was one of the richest regions of the Western Empire and a crucial source of tax revenue and grain. Losing it meant losing money, food, and strategic power. And again, one crisis fed another. Less tax revenue meant less money for the army. A weaker army meant less ability to defend territory. Losing more territory meant even less revenue. This is why Rome's fall is so difficult to explain with one simple answer. Economic weakness damaged the state. Political instability damaged leadership. Civil wars damaged the army. Military weakness made invasions more dangerous. Invasions reduced revenue. Reduced revenue made the military problem worse. Each crisis made the next crisis harder to survive. By 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire was already a shadow of what it had once been. When the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was removed by Odoacer, it became the traditional date for the fall of Rome. But in reality, 476 was more like the final symbol of a collapse that had been unfolding for generations. The title of emperor still existed, but the authority behind it had already been hollowed out. And it is important to remember that the Roman Empire did not completely end in 476. The Eastern Roman Empire, often called the Byzantine Empire, continued for nearly another 1,000 years. So when we talk about the fall of Rome, we are really talking about the fall of the Western Roman Empire. That distinction matters because it shows that Rome's collapse was not automatic everywhere. The East survived because it had stronger finances, richer cities, better defenses, and more stable institutions at key moments. The West faced too many connected pressures at once. So why did the Western Roman Empire fall? Not simply because of barbarians, not simply because of bad emperors, not simply because of inflation, corruption, or military decline. It fell because all of these problems became connected. Rome's enemies did not create every weakness inside the empire. They exposed weaknesses that had been building for a long time. That is what makes the fall of Rome so powerful as a historical lesson. Great powers rarely collapse in a single moment. More often, they weaken slowly while daily life continues. Markets still open, officials still give orders, soldiers still march. People still believe the system will recover because it has survived crises before. But there is a difference between surviving a crisis and solving the problems that caused it. Rome survived many crises without fully repairing the system underneath. Over time, the damage accumulated. Eventually, the empire lost the ability to respond. That may be the most important point. Collapse is not always a sudden explosion. Sometimes it is a slow loss of capacity. A state loses the ability to collect taxes effectively. Then it loses the ability to pay soldiers reliably. Then it loses the ability to defend borders. Then it loses the loyalty of provinces. Then local powers become stronger than central authority. And by the time the final moment arrives, the collapse has already happened in practice. The official ending only confirms what has been true for a long time. The Western Roman Empire did not fall overnight. It fell gradually through economic weakness, political violence, military change, social division, and external pressure. The barbarians did not simply destroy Rome from the outside. They arrived when Rome was already struggling to hold itself together, and that is why Rome's fall still fascinates us. It is not just a story about ancient history. It is a story about how powerful systems can look stable long after they have become fragile. It is a story about what happens when short-term survival replaces long-term repair. Rome did not die from one wound. It died from many wounds, each making the others worse. And when the last emperor in the West was finally removed in 476 AD, it was not the beginning of the end. It was only the final confirmation that the collapse had begun long before.